Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Before I get started, I just want to say I hope everyone is doing well considering the coronavirus has reached another spike. Also, if you're under the weather, I hope you feel better soon. As far as myself is concerned, I am becoming adjusted to this being a whole new world, but at the same time, I'm having to indulge in a little bit more escapism just for my own sanity, such as at the moment, I'm reading 3 different books where one's in print, another one's an ebook, and I'm also listening to an audiobook. So I'm just indulging in all of the things I enjoy, which I don't know if I've said this before, but I absolutely love audiobooks. And the reason why is because I can listen to a story and work on my loom knitting at the same time. So for those reasons, it feels like it's doubly therapeutic. But with that said, let's go on and get down to what you can expect from this weekend's book review, which I'm reviewing All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes by John Farris, which the first time I read this, it really felt like it had potential, but at the same time, I kind of felt like it was just overrated and it was mediocre. So, with me understanding that the book did have potential, I'm like, okay, well, where did I go wrong here? And that's when I realized that during this time, I just had a lot of distractions going on, so I wasn't able to give the book my all. So, instead of just simply saying, it's an okay book, whatever, and just pushing it aside, I decided I'm just going to put it over here and return to it at a later date so maybe I can enjoy it a little bit better. So recently I downloaded the audiobook and I kicked back with my loom knitting and I invested more of my focus on the story, which by doing this I discovered that I became more invested in the story itself, the characters, the plot was very original, and I was able to gain some food for thought, which the first time I read this, it was as a surface read, but as I was really paying attention to what the author had to say, I believe he was trying to tell the reader that America's bloody past wasn't that long ago. So because of those reasons, it really raised the book up for me and I enjoyed it quite a bit more than I did before. But without me rambling any further, let's go on and get down to what you can expect as all heads turn when the hunt goes by. Unfortunately, I don't have a print copy of All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By. However, it is available in print, ebook, and audio, so getting your hands on a copy is not hard to do. Also, during my research, I discovered in the UK this was released by the title Bad Blood, so if you live in the UK, you might want to search Bad Blood to get a copy of this. Now, as far as this book is concerned, it is a Southern Gothic horror novel that's set in the 1940s, and it introduces us to the character by the name of Champ Bradwin, who is a part of the wealthy military family known as the Bradwins, and they're really famous for having the plantation called Dasharoons. Now, we enter his life the moment he starts writing about what happened at his brother's wedding, which his brother by the nickname of Clipper is getting married, and everything about this day just seems like it's a fairy tale waiting to happen. However, midway through the ceremony, all hell breaks loose. Then we fast forward to about 2 years later, and the story takes us from Tennessee to Kansas City, Missouri, and we become introduced to the character by the name of Jackson, which even though Jackson says he's a doctor, he really just practices medicine under the table, so for this reason, he sometimes gets some odd requests. Well, one day his friend by the name of Beggs comes to see him, and she explains that she rescued an injured man from the street, but she didn't turn him into the hospital because she was afraid he was AWOL. So for this reason, Jackson goes to her place to check on the stranger, and lo and behold, the stranger is actually Champ. which Champ explains he's trying to get home to Dasharoons because his wife Nancy is in grave danger. However, due to his condition, he's not fit to travel alone, so Jackson goes with him. And when they arrive at Dasharoons, Jackson discovers there's some strange things going on that kind of remind him of some bizarre events that happened in his childhood. Also, he gets sucked into the Bradwin family curse, which the Bradwins brought on themselves due to a horrible injustice that happened years ago. In my research for All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By, I learned this novel was a game changer for voodoo-themed horror. Until its release, voodoo was treated as hokey or pulpish without any context to what or who its practitioners worshipped. Also, whenever voodoo appeared in a movie or book, it was instantly demonized. In comparison to other previous voodoo-themed works, the voodoo presented in this novel becomes professional and sophisticated, as it goes as far as listing some of the Loas by name, such as Papa Legba and Ida Weedo. And rather than demonizing voodoo, Farris took time to understand the religion for its light and dark as he and his sister researched arcane material and conducted interviews, which granted a level of authenticity to this fictional work. Aside from utilizing actual names worshipped in voodoo, there are some groundbreaking taboo sex scenes in this novel as well. And in the book Horror, 100 Best Books by Kim Newman and Stephen Jones, author David J. Scowl dubbed All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By as the first modern sexual horror novel, which makes sense as this classic was published in 1977 by Playboy Press. Fun facts! Here's a few things you may or may not know about John Farris and All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By. While John Farris was born in 1936 in Jefferson City, Missouri, he was raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and he is widely known for his Southern Gothic fiction. Over his writing career, Farris has written over 40 books, which include works under the pseudonym Steve Brackeen. And after a long line of having published suspense novels, Farris returned to horror in the mid-70s with novels like The Fury and All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By. And upon his return, he became dubbed as one of the main authors who helped to redefine the horror genre for the approaching decades. In an issue of Fangoria in 1987, Farris was asked which of his books was his favorite. In reply, he said All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By, which he considers this to be funny because he hated every page as he wrote the novel, and he claims this work was one of the most difficult books he had ever written. Also, he wrote the last 3 chapters the night before his wedding, and until the last night, Farris admits he didn't know how the book would end. 2 years later, after it being published, he went back and read it where he said he wouldn't change a thing. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section of this video, which if you've never read this book before, I'm going to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. If you wish to click away, just scroll down to the comments section of this video, and you'll see I have a comment pinned at the top with the timestamp in it. All you have to do is click that timestamp and it will redirect you away from the spoilers to the thoughts section. You only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go. Since everyone has had the opportunity to click away, I want to talk about a few moments that caught me off guard. Now, the first scene that really took me by surprise was the wedding ceremony. And what happens here is everything is just set up to be like this fairy tale type of wedding, but midway through, Clipper goes batshit crazy and takes his saber, then hacks his bride up. He hacks up a few people who are a part of the wedding party, then he cuts his father's head off and commits suicide. And by how this is constructed, I just did not see it coming whatsoever. Like, Farris is the type of author where he can take a tranquil moment and turn it into a bloodbath nightmare, and the transition between this and that is only just a few sentences, which by the time we're sucked into the brutality, it's kind of like, WTF, how did I get here? So that was really awesome. Now, the second moment that took me by surprise was when you had Old Lamb, who was explaining to Bo that he had taught Ty voodoo, which the reason why he did this is because he was hoping the Loa could act as Ty's mentors. However, Ty ended up using his knowledge to exact his revenge on the Bradwins. Well, as Old Lamb is explaining this, snakes start to drop from out of nowhere. Then his granddaughter appears, and when she opens her mouth, the sound of a rattlesnake comes out. And while this is really cool and original, this is where things get really disturbing, because the next thing you know, Old Lamb is stripping naked because he's freaking out and he's just about to die. And while this is going down, his granddaughter jumps on top of him and tries to rape him as he's dying. And that, it's just as bad as what it sounds, trust me. Now, the third thing that I want to touch on is with Nora. Okay, so I understood very early on that Nora was the bad guy, but I did not realize that Nora had no clue she was evil. Because every time the evil comes out in her, she goes into this trance-like state, and she has no recollection of what happened during those times. But one of the things that really surprised me was even when she was a little girl, she had been raised to be venomous. And that's not just a choice of words. Like, she actually had snake venom put in her body. So if she were to bite or scratch somebody, she would kill them because of the amount of toxins in her blood or saliva. Now, the second thing about Nora that just caught me off guard here, and I don't fault Nora for this because she was in a trance, but at the same time I was like, oh, Nora, honey, no. This is when she decides to gain some strength by having sex with a horse. So, here's some life advice. When a horse says nay, it means nay, okay? Now, after she has sex with the horse and he busts his nut all over old Nora girl, she gets down there and starts performing oral, and then she bites the horse on its junk. So, yeah, this is very detailed, and, hey, this is a book published by Playboy, so yeah, of course we're gonna have some graphic sex scenes. Now, aside from all of those moments, I do have a few honorable mentions I would like to talk about, which, what is a voodoo book without a zombie? Well, truth be it, we have 2 zombies in this book. First off, we have where Nancy comes out of her coffin after it's thrown off of the train, and how this is constructed. It has this beautiful kind of ghastly detail to it, but then in contrast, we have where the Clipper zombie has come back to kill Champ. And how this is described, it's very just horrific. It's nightmare fuel. That's the thing with this moment. It is just creepy as hell. So it was really cool to see the contrast in how the zombies were made for this book. Now, another moment that really just stood out to me is the ending where Champ finally kills Nora. Well, Jackson has become so obsessed with Nora that as she's dying, he takes her fingernails and jabs them into his veins where he can die from poisoning. And something about this really just reminded me of Romeo and Juliet. I guess it was like the death, then suicide, so they could be together in death. So that was pretty cool. And another concept that I felt was original was after Jackson discovered that Nora was poisonous, but he was so obsessed by her, he wanted to keep having sex with her. He created a fetish out of her so he could be protected and she wouldn't be able to harm him. And I really felt like that had not been done before. But out of the other scenes in this book, there's a lot more I would like to talk about, but instead I would like to go on and move on to the tea time. I want to use this opportunity to defend Tyrone because, truth be it, if I was in his shoes, I would have put a curse on those egotistical Bradwin bitches myself. And truth be it, he always receives the short end of the stick. And yeah, I do understand that Bo got the short end of the stick as well, but he didn't have it as bad as Tyrone. And here's my reasoning for saying that. Okay, so Bo is Boss's white son. At the same time, Tyrone is Boss's mixed son. And the reason why is because one day Boss decided to have a roll in the hay with one of the plantation workers. Now, here's what goes down. Okay, so one day Boss is beating the shit out of one of the plantation workers and Bo ain't having it. So he goes up to Boss and cracks him over the head with a gun. Well, the repercussions of this is Bo gets kicked off of the plantation of Dasharoons and is told never to return. However, had Ty done this, Ty would have been killed. And to back this statement, all you have to do is consider what goes down in this book at the Chickasaw County War. So, yeah, we see privilege and skin tone here. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is even though Boss does acknowledge Tyrone as being his son, it's kept in the shadows, and Tyrone does not have all of the privileges that Boss's white children have. Now, he does have a little bit of leeway here, but he's still kept on a tight leash. Now, also, at the same time, when Boss dies, Tyrone gets nothing in the will. And that was a major kick in the butt because not only was Tyrone Boss's son, but also Tyrone and his ancestors had slaved for this plantation to be what it is. So, yeah, already blood boiling. Well, we get to a point in the book that shines some light on Tyrone's childhood, and this is the moment where I would have hated the Bradwins till the day I died. Now, what happens here is you have where Clipper takes Tyrone out to a field and ties him to a tree with rusted barbed wire, then he sets the field on fire. And if Tyrone wants to live, he has to pull himself out of the barbed wire, thus disfiguring himself. And he's even asked, why didn't he tell Boss about this after he got himself free? And Tyrone responds, well, had I told Boss, nothing would have been done because Clipper is his white son. I am his mixed child. He would have believed Clipper over me. So those weren't the exact words, but you get what I'm stepping in. So truth be it, yeah, Bradwins, those sons of bitches deserved what they got. Foremost, All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By is a Southern Gothic horror novel. However, at the same time, it's also a plantation novel that's set during World War II. And for these reasons, there's a lot of derogatory words used throughout. And yeah, I did have some knee-jerk reactions over this, but at the same time, I'm glad the author didn't whitewash anything because if he had, that would have been like him saying things weren't as bad as what they really were, and that would have been a bigger problem in my opinion. Now, another thing I noticed about this book is even though the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, we see how racism transitioned from the 1800s into the 1900s. And even though at the end of this book everything feels like all loose ends are tied up, there's still something that feels open, and I can't help but feel like it's the idea that racism never ended and it's something that has continued on into our generation. So that was interesting to consider. And as far as commentary is concerned, I noticed where the book focused on three main subjects. The first one is the dangers of obsession. And this comes about because of how Jackson treats Nora and also how Nora's doctor treats her case. The second subject that comes about is gender inequality. And this happens because even though Nora is married to Boss, when Boss passes away, she does not inherit anything property-wise of Dasharoons. All of that goes to a son by the name of Champ. And even though Nora was Champ's stepmother, she was still married to Boss, and that should have counted for something a little more. And granted, yes, she did receive a few benefits, but at the same time, those came with stipulations, so she was still under Boss's thumb. And another subject that comes into play is racial inequality, which I discussed this in the spoiler section, so I won't mention it again here. But some good examples of this is pretty much everything that happens to Ty and all of the other helpers on the plantation, as well as what goes down at the Chickasaw County War. So there you go. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, you're going to know soon. But aside from that, the character development was really damn good. Like, I also noticed that there was a curveball that was thrown that caught me off guard, because when the book first started, I thought that Champ was going to be the character who we rooted for, and he was painted in a light that showed he was worthy of our sympathy and empathy. However, as the book continued, I noticed that there were other characters who were more worthy of those emotions, such as Aunt Clara Jean, Hackalea, Old Lamb, Nora, and even Ty. So that was pretty cool. Now, as I was reading this book, I noticed that maybe it was inspired by a few other classics, and I don't have proof on that, but as I read it, it felt like a lot of Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad had inspired this book, and I also saw some elements that might have come from Rapisi's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And there was even a scene that reminded me of Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. So to see all of that come together for a Southern Gothic horror novel about voodoo was pretty cool. Now, as far as being scared goes, this book did not scare me and it did not creep me out. However, with that said, there's a lot of shock value to this book, and also it has a lot of great commentary to it as well. Plus, the greatest thing about this is the author knows how to keep the reader on their toes. Although I simply felt this was an okay book the first time I read it, I'm glad I came back to it because I really enjoyed it a lot more the second go around. And if you aren't willing to give your undivided attention to this book when you read it, you're going to miss out on a lot. So for that reason, I am going to say definitely read this at a time when you can focus. And yes, I do highly recommend that you check this book out because it's very original and there's a lot of stuff that goes down that just catches you off guard. So yes, definitely pick it up. On to the questions. My first question is, what is a horror novel you would recommend that takes place at a plantation? Load up the comments. My second question is, how do you feel when an actual spirit or deity is used in a fictional sense for entertainment purposes? Personally, it doesn't bother me. Even if there's some inaccuracies, it doesn't bother me because I can tell the difference between fact and fiction. But at the same time, I really do appreciate it when the author takes their time and does their research and presents some legitimacy with the characters they're writing about. And even though I feel like All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes By does a good job of this, I feel like The Good House by Tananarive did a better job. And if you would like to see my book review on that title, just go to the description section of this video and click on the link that I provided. And with that said, just load up how you feel about that question, and I look forward to seeing your answers. But now it's time to go in and close out this weekend's video, which before I do, I would like to say thank you to Lisa G, Joseph Baylott, and Melody Romeo, which Melody Romeo is a fantasy author, and she also writes historical fiction. But if you would like to get your hands on her work, it's available in ebook and print, so it's not hard to do. And if you're wondering why I'm giving a shout out to these wonderful people, it's because they have decided to contribute to my Patreon account. And if you would like to contribute as well, the link is available in my description section. And for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. If you're a creator, I'll mention what it is that you do so people can look you up. And also, I do have a $10 tier where if you want to do $10 a month, I still give you that shout out at the end of my videos. But at the beginning of each month, I send you over one of my photos, which I do creepy photography on the side. And once you receive that photo, you can print it off, do whatever you want with it. And if you can do this, that's awesome. If not, that's cool too. I hope you just continue coming back to this channel so we can have fun together. And if you would like to hunt me down on social media, I have links for my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok all in the description section of this video as well. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have tons of more great book reviews coming in the near future. But until we see each other again, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.